Mary Sanford was put on trial in 1662 during Connecticut's fervent witch hunt period, and it offers one of the more documented cases of the time. There were societal pressures, religious influences, and judicial practices of the area that were absolutely crazy. Although not as widely known as other witch trials, the case against Mary Sanford is particularly significant due to the atmosphere of hysteria in Hartford at the specifics of her prosecution. Mary Sanford was the wife of Andrew Sanford, a blacksmith living in Hartford. The couple was of lower economic standing, which made them susceptible to witchcraft accusations. Andrew himself had been accused of witchcraft just 2 years prior in 1660, although he was acquitted. His involvement in such an accusation already cast a shadow of suspicion over their entire home. This history played a huge role in the increased scrutiny of Mary. Being a blacksmith's wife and living on the social fringes, Mary did not enjoy the protection that wealth or influential connections could offer. The couple had several children, which further complicated their economic status. In Puritan society, where economic misfortunes could easily be viewed through the lens of divine punishment, poverty, or perceived disorder in the house was often linked to accusations of witchcraft. Mary's standing as a relatively poor woman, potentially outspoken, and the wife of a previously accused man, all placed her in a very precarious position. The backdrop to Mary's trial is critical to the story. Hartford in 1662 was gripped by a full-scale witch panic. The death of an 8-year-old Elizabeth Kelly that same year had sparked a wave of trials that ensnared Mary. Young Elizabeth had died suddenly under mysterious circumstances, and the accusations of witchcraft were levied against several women, including Rebecca Greensmith and Mary Sanford. They were connected to the child's death. The community's panic was further fueled by prior accusations of witchcraft. The notable trial and execution of Lydia Gilbert in 1654 had left a lingering sense of fear in Hartford. And by 1662, this fear intensified. Residents began blaming misfortunes on witches acting under the influence of Satan. The prevailing belief was that witches conspired with the devil to cause sickness, death, and mischief. And in this climate, anyone accused of witchcraft was unlikely to receive a fair trial. And the mere suspicion was enough to set the judicial machinery into motion. Mary Sanford was accused of several specific acts of witchcraft. Witnesses, some who may have been her neighbors, claimed that Mary used malevolent magic to harm livestock. She caused illness. One particular damning accusation was that Mary had used witchcraft to spoil the crops of a local farmer, resulting in his family's near starvation. In this society where food shortages were a matter of life and death, such an accusation held considerable weight. Additionally, there were claims that Mary's specter had appeared in the homes of several neighbors. Spectral evidence, testimony that the spirit was accused and seen committing acts of witchcraft. It was key in many witch trials of the area. In Mary's case, witnesses stated that her spirit had tormented them at nighttime, causing physical ailments like sudden fevers and fits. This type of evidence was notoriously unreliable, but in the eyes of the deeply religious magistrates, it was taken as a sign of guilt. Another notable element was the accusations that Mary's alleged connection to the broader witches' covenant. The idea of witches working in groups, working together, conspiring. It was all a common theme in witch trials. And Mary was accused of meeting with other witches in secret gatherings where they said to plot against the community. And it was particularly tied to the accusations that she conspired with Rebecca Greensmith, who was executed alongside her. Mary Sanford's trial followed the typical procedures of 17th century witch trials in Connecticut. The magistrates, led by Governor John Winthrop Jr., sought to establish proof of her witchcraft through both direct testimony and spectral evidence admissible in court. Neighbors came forward and testified against her. They described supernatural occurrences that they attributed to Mary. The legal process involved rigorous questioning. While there was no direct record of Mary's confession, it is known that many accused women were coerced into confessing through intense pressure. And confessions were often the result of fear and the belief that admitting guilt might spare them the death penalty, though this rarely happened in practice. A crucial element of the trial was the involvement of local ministers. They reinforced the belief that witchcraft was real and it was a present danger. Religious leaders often cited biblical texts as justification for the execution of witches, further legitimizing the use of death. And in Mary's case, the religious context was inseparable from the legal proceedings. Mary Sanford was convicted of witchcraft and sentenced to death by hanging. Her execution took place in late 1662 alongside Rebecca Greensmith. And there were also others that had been implicated in the same witchcraft panic. Public executions were a somber and terrifying event, designed to instill fear in the community and deter any perceived devil worship or witchcraft. The execution itself took place on Gallows Hill, a site designated for such purposes. The community gathered to witness the event, which was both religious and a public spectacle. Mary Sanford was bound and led to the gallows. She was one of several condemned women executed in front of the entire town. The fear and tension in Hartford would have been palpable as the executioners carried out the sentence. The 1662 executions, including that of Mary Sanford, were part of a wider pattern of witch trials in Connecticut, which saw 11 executions between 1647 and 1697. These trials, they were all driven by religious fanaticism, personal vendettas, and the societal instability of the time. And by the early 18th century, attitudes towards witchcraft prosecutions, they changed. And the use of spectral evidence was discredited and not even used anymore. But that shift came a little bit too late for Mary Sanford and the many others who were wrongly executed. These are Interesting Things with JC.